Welcome to Caffeinated Flicks. I'm Celeste.
And I'm Kenzie. We're two chicks who drink coffee
and celebrate flicks from diverse directors.
If you like what you're hearing so far, take a moment to follow us in your favorite podcasting app.
And give us a rating or review. Here's the show.
Today we have a very special guest for this episode, California native Tim Williams, who has been training animals for both the film industry and private individuals since 1990. Tim began his career volunteering with highly renowned dog trainers and wildlife rehabilitation centers. He went on to work for several animal training companies in the motion picture industry, where he began to broaden his horizons, working with both domestic and exotic animals. With over 17 years of experience in both television and motion pictures, combined with a specialty in aggression management and obedience for nearly 18 years, Tim started his own company, Sarah Clarita Animals, in 2004. Thank you so much for joining us, Tim.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
So glad that you could join us, especially being somebody who works behind the scenes of a movie. You get to be our very first on the set guest. So Tim, what are you drinking today?
Oh, you know what? I'm just doing plain Kool-aid. That's it.
Kool-aid. Ooh, I haven't seen what flavor.
Just like fruit punch.
Okay.
It's like sugar-free fruit punch Kool-aid.
I just recently got the grape sugar-free Kool-Aid. It's quite tasty.
Yeah, it works.
What about you, Celeste? What are you drinking today?
So I went to Lola Coffee this morning, and I had a peppermint mocha. It's his season.
You're getting all up in the season.
Yes. What did you have? Or what do you have?
I made myself an Americano with oat milk. So nothing too fancy.
Yum. Yum, yum.
Shall we go into the history of the movie then? Tim, you have had lots of background on this movie. Specifically, I believe you were the wolf trainer for the movie. Is that correct?
Correct.
How does that process work when, people come together to create a movie and then they need to get animals? Like, what is that process like?
So I could tell you how my process was for this particular movie. Probably about a year and a half before we filmed the movie, I bred a pack of wolf dogs to use for movie industry, not knowing about this job, not even having a job plan. So I bred this litter and I kept every single one of them. And I just trained them to be movie animals. So when this movie came around, they were looking for a pack of wolves that can work together. And so I was just in the right spot at the right time. And so my friend, Sled Reynolds, he owns a company called Gentle Jungle. It was his job. He was the animal coordinator. And then he hired me to bring the wolves to do the wolf part.
Oh, wow. That is so cool. Do you breed wolves and like huskies together or German shepherds? What is the mix?
For this particular mix, it was your average American timber wolf with a Malamute.
Oh, wow. So huge dogs.
Yeah. Yeah. So they were just like super huge. We call them Holly wolves because they don't like really look like wolves per se, but they definitely have the Holly look. So they just worked out.
That.
When you use a pure wolf, you can use pure wolves for movie work, but pure wolves are just a little bit more difficult to work with because they tend to be shy and very apprehensive when it comes to new situations. When they're hybrid, you can just work with them at a more rapid, fast pace because on a movie set, things are changing constantly.
Right.
So you just need an animal that can adapt to that. And there's also like a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. Does it help with like temperament as well, as far as knowing that they're likely to be easy to work with people as opposed to not?
Absolutely. They're just more, forgiving to any situation you put them in than a pure wolf. Now I've had their father is a pure wolf. He's passed away and he was exceptional. I actually brought their father to be involved with the movie as well. So he was part of them.
Oh, wow. That's so cool. So we connected because of your cousin Steve, and he had mentioned that I believe you've also trained like primates and regular dogs and some other animals as well. So what is perhaps the wildest animal you've worked with? I don't know if that's the
Most
correct
exotic.
phrasing.
That's always a hard question for me to answer. I could tell you the most difficult of the wild animals I work with. Primates are always the hardest. Yeah. Primates are always the hardest because they just tend to be a little more unpredictable. And then they're very political. You know what I mean? So what I mean by
What
political
does that mean?
is when you bring a monkey into a room, he just starts like picking out people like, oh, I don't like her because she's a female. I really like him because he's a male, but I don't like her because of this and that. They're just very judgmental. They just use their judgment to be aggressive at times.
Oh my. So you're like, everybody,
Yeah.
he doesn't like red today. You can't wear any red. It's fine.
Right. Yeah. You know what I mean? They can be like super in love with someone that has red hair and then want to get aggressive with someone that has curly hair. They're just really political as far as how they deal with people.
That's wild. Cool. I have to ask also, in regards to filming Chronicles of Narnia, what was your experience like? Did you participate like every day? Was it during a week? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah. First and foremost, I for surely enjoyed it. When we got hired for this movie, we started working with the animals for about 3 months, maybe even 4 months here in Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
So it was me and 10 other trainers just really working and training the wolves to do exactly what needed to happen in a script. Because we get a script that sort of tells you exactly the movement that they want from the animals. And we just prep them to do it, you know? So we did that. And then we had to have them like under a controlled quarantine because to get them into New Zealand was very sensitive because they don't have rabies there. So they're very strict. I think, I'm not 100%, but I think that my wolves were like the first wolves ever step on the country of New Zealand. They're very strict. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That took a lot of
Way.
lawyers, a lot of legal work, a lot of lawyers to make that happen. And even once we got there, we were like still like in a quarantine type situation.
That's
4 months
intense.
before we got there. Then once we got there, I think we worked there for about 3 months, 2 to 3 months, and worked pretty much. I mean, as trainers, we're working with the animals every day on set, maybe 2 or 3 times a week for sure. Sometimes 5 or 6.
I know that there are a lot of animals in the Chronicles of Narnia. Which ones were real? I know that Aslan was CGI, but you've got like, horses and cheetahs and gorillas and
Gophers.
tigers.
Or what were they? Not gophers.
Yeah.
No, like the horses were real for sure. Vlad was he was in charge of all the animals, but he was mainly focused on the horses and stuff. The wolves were real. All the other stuff was CGI. And they pretty much did the wolves CGI as well. I didn't really understand what was going on. This is like the first time it's ever happened in my career, but like I didn't know how they were going to film this. So we were filming the whole movie and they were basically using the wolves as a template to add CGI to them. Everything was filmed in real time and the wolves did everything. It's just that they added CGI to them just so they could match all the other animals that were doing CGI. That makes sense?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there were a lot of talking animals, and
They
you
didn't
know,
want them to look-
Communicating.
accordingly.
Yeah.
Right. But you had to do CGI for the wolves to talk and kind of stuff. Well,
Yeah. I was like wondering, were there any like obstacles you ran into with filming with the wolves? Were any of them not cooperating or
you know what?
not
Like
following script?
I had a pack of them. So at that time, I think I had 8 of them there. Right. It's like coaching a little league team. You got ones that was like part of the team. You got one sort of like, oh, man, he's not good, but he tries, you know?
Stay forever.
It's never going to be a perfect day. We're just trying to win the game. Like at the end of it,
Yeah.
at the end of the movie, but
I was just going to ask if there was like a specific treat that maybe the animals responded to better or that they preferred when you really wanted their attention.
for these guys, it was just raw chicken.
Okay.
They love raw chicken. Yeah. Chicken and chop
So
it up
nothing
into
too
like
fancy.
little pieces and with the bone, the skin and everything. Yeah. They love raw chicken and raw meat.
Bone and everything.
Oh, yeah. It was really weird because in New Zealand, they eat a lot of lamb out there. And the wolves didn't really like the lamb. They really like it.
They have specific tastes.
Yeah, they were like, they really didn't like it. I was super surprised. They was like, yeah, I don't really like the lamb.
Awesome.
Shall we continue on with our notes? We'll
Sure.
have more questions for you as we go on. Like I have a very specific question for you, but we won't get into it until the cast. So Chronicles of
Right.
Narnia was directed by Andrew Adamson. He was born on December 1st in Auckland, New Zealand. So if I recall correctly, that's part of the reason why they filmed in New Zealand is because he's from New Zealand, but also just the landscape of New Zealand, like Lord of the Rings is filmed in New Zealand and all that.
Yeah.
Such a great landscape for these kinds of
Beautiful. Yeah.
mystical movies.
Not probably that is you had a very experienced technical crew that's already there and local. Most of the people who worked on our crew were Lord of the Rings guys.
Yeah, because it was right after, I think, Lord of the Rings, maybe, or maybe
This is about
during.
4 years after Lord of
Is
the
it?
Rings.
Oh, okay.
'Cause
Yeah, so there was a
Chronicles of Narnia
crew
came
out there
out-
that was, we just had access. Normally, if you film a movie out of the country, you have to bring so many crew members from Los Angeles. It costs money to do that. Where with a movie like Narnia, shooting in New Zealand, you still had to bring crew members, but you don't have to bring as many because there's so many crew members already there that are super experienced that can do the job.
That's so cool. Sorry, I'm
Awesome.
thinking now. I'm like processing all of that.
So even though it was from New Zealand, there's a good chance that if that crew wasn't there, they wouldn't have shot it there.
That makes sense.
That makes sense.
Some of the other movies that Adamson was known for is Shrek 2, Shrek, the first one. I don't know why that's out of order. And then, of course, Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah.
Getting into the cast, we have the marvelous Tilda Swinton as the White Witch. And I didn't realize that this was Tilda Swinton until I actually looked at the cast because I saw this movie when I was so young. And I was like, oh, she's just so statuesque. And that was, I think, part of her character. But I'm curious, did you get to meet Tilda Swinton?
Or any of the cast, yeah.
That too, yeah.
All right, so I could say that I've probably met most of the cast, but it was always just passing, just seeing them on set, or they may have kids over or a family and just want to come see Wolf. The way that we had it set up is the Wolves never really directly work with actors.
For
Probably
safety,
for safety.
reason, probably.
Not just that. They always say the worst thing you can work with is kids and animals. So you add both of them together in the same scene.
Oh, yeah.
It could just be a
Double
long day.
trouble.
You know what I mean? So, right.
Awesome.
You know,
So-
sometimes it's easier to just shoot their part, and then add it, you know?
Right. Just kind of combine it all together or layer it on top of each other.
Right.
So the rest of the cast includes Georgie Henley as Lucy, William Mosley as Peter, Skandar Kenganis. I'm going to hope that I said that right, and that's probably not true. But who plays Edmund, Anna Popplewell, who plays Susan, the illuminous James McAvoy, who plays Mr. Tumnus, Jim Broadbent, who plays Professor Kirk. But that makes
That's
up
okay.
most of our cast.
So I had
uh,
no idea that Liam Neeson was in this movie until I saw the
mhm,
credits. Where I did see your
plays
name, Tim.
Aslan.
I made sure to keep an eye out for that.
Oh,
But
that's nice.
yeah. I'm assuming you didn't get to see him in passing though, since all of his was voiceover work. So I'm guessing he didn't make it out to New Zealand, or I don't know if you have an idea about that.
Now, was that Nim?
Mhm.
Liam Neeson.
Yeah,
Mr.
Liam.
Neeson.
I did not see him on that movie, but I did work with him for 2 years on his Showtime show,
Coulda showed
Ray
okay,
Ray
Ray
Donovan.
Donovan.
Oh.
Yeah.
Cool. A fun fact about Tilda Swinton's character: she was the first choice for the role of the White Witch, even though she hadn't read the book prior to filming. She also wore platform shoes underneath her costume to make her look so tall, and she used a brace on
Ooh.
her shoulders between takes to give her a break from holding up the weight of her wig and crown.
It's hilarious.
Wow. Yeah.
Yes.
Celeste, do you want to do the 10 out of 10 then?
Yes, I will go ahead and do it.
Perfect.
All right, so 10 out of 10. The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is now my favorite movie. This movie was fantastic. The actors are amazing, and the movie is just so exactly like the book. If you read the book and are going to see the movie, you will not be disappointed. The movie was better than I expected, actually. It's such an amazing and imaginative movie. It's just enchanting. I wouldn't normally give any movie 10 stars, but I give this one 10 out of 10. 10 stars out of 10. When I was watching the movie and seeing all the sets and the props, I felt like I had already seen them before. Like they had taken them right out of my imagination when I was reading the book. I know not everyone will have this feeling, but I did, and it was magical. Even if you don't want to see this movie, go because it really is a spectacular and magical movie.
I will preface that a lot of times when we read the 1 out of 10s, we sit there and we're like, were you actually watching this movie? We usually take the 1 out of 10s with a 10th grain of salt. So,
Right. I'm just
1 out
listening
of
like,
10.
okay.
1 out of 10. What is wrong with everyone? Why do so many people give this movie such high praise? I just got back from seeing this and I can honestly say it was the biggest disappointment of the year. I went into it with high hopes as I loved the book as a child, but within half an hour I was waiting for it to end. It was only 2 hours long, but it felt like 4 hours. I thought it was too slow, too long, and badly acted, with the exception of the witch, who was all right. But the main problem was that none of the characters was either likable or engaging. It has been a long time since I have seen a collection of such grating children. Perhaps we've been spoiled by children's movies of late, but I expect them to aim a little higher. Without further ado, shall we get into the movie recap?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. We open up the movie. It's the midst of World War II, and we're in Britain during the Blitz because the Germans are bombing Britain. And Edmund is near the window as the children's mom pulls them away and evacuate the children from the building. Edmund, however, runs right back in to get a photo of his dad, and Peter runs after him. After they safely finally make it out of the house, picture of their dad in hand, Peter then berates Edmund for being selfish and almost getting himself killed. This will not be the first or only time that this happens. Peter likes to berate Edmund a lot. So next, we're at the train station where their mom, whose name is Mrs. Pevensey, is putting the children on a train to send them away during the wartime. And this is where we find out officially that their dad is off fighting the war. So his mom puts Peter in charge of the others, and the rest of the children say their goodbyes as they all board the train. I don't know what the exact ages of these children are supposed to be, so these are my guesses. Feel free to dispute. But I think Lucy's probably about 8-ish, Edmund's probably about 11, Susan's maybe 14, and Peter's like 16. Those are my guesses.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, that's about accurate.
Oh, cool. I'm so glad. I was like thinking about what it's like to be a child of that specific age. And I'm like, this seems about the right behavior for a child who's 11, who's a little bit of a shit, but wants to get in an elbow every once in a while.
Middle child syndrome.
Right.
So the kids arrive at a stop where they're the only ones who are dropped off, and they're picked up by a woman, Mrs. McCready, who is the housekeeper for Professor Kurt. She gives them rules as they enter the house. No running or shouting, no improper use of the dumbwaiter, no touching, and no disturbing the professor. She's very adamant about that. We have no idea what he teaches. We have no idea why he's supposed to be so secluded. All we know is you're not allowed to talk to the professor. It's giving me very Secret Garden vibes with her uncle, who's just a recluse who doesn't leave his room.
Right. He sounds a lot like me.
So,
Just an introvert.
right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I just want to know why. The kids are slowly getting settled, and Lucy's very sad, which any child who's pulled out of their home during wartime totally makes sense that they're sad. Susan and Peter try and comfort her, and they'll be going back soon, but Edmund retorts, if there's a home to go home to, that of course causes Peter to worry him again. The next day it's raining, so the kids are completely barred from going outside, and Lucy suggests that they entertain themselves by playing hide and seek. Peter starts to count, and I think he's counting to 100. This is a really intense game of hide and seek. You have a very
Maybe
long
like
time.
30 seconds max, but
I
100,
know.
that's
Like you count to 20
Right.
and that's it.
Right.
All the rest of them scatter. Lucy is trying to find a place, but then Edmund beats her to it. So then she finds the spare room where the wardrobe is, and she climbs inside of it to hide. And as she's continuously scurrying back further into the wardrobe, she suddenly brushes up against some snowy branches. She turns around and is completely astonished and bewildered. She's got this little gleam in her eyes like she's never seen a white Christmas before. And then a few yards away from the wardrobe is a lamppost. Now, this is a very iconic lamppost for this film. It'll be the center point of knowing where the wardrobe is anytime they come upon it. But as she's staring at the lamppost, she starts hearing some scurrying around in the woods, and all of a sudden Mr. Tumnus comes out, and they scare the hell out of each other. He goes running in one direction, she goes running in the other direction, and then slowly but surely they start walking towards each other very antsily. I will say, for all of my life, I thought that Mr. Tumnus was Mr. Thomas, but just said weirdly. So I was like, oh, it actually
Okay.
is the benefit of subtitles.
yes.
Lucy asks what he is, and he says that he's a faun, and he asks her, are you some kind of hairless dwarf? And she says, no, I'm a girl. And he becomes bewildered with that, and he's, are you a daughter of Eve, a human? And she's like, yeah, what else would I be? And he gets very concerned about this. She starts to ask where she is, and he says, we're in Narnia. And she's like, what's Narnia? He's like, you're in from the lamppost to the faraway castle on that side. They shake hands, but of course he's never shaken a hand before, so he just shakes it from side to side as opposed to up and down. And he invites her to tea at his place. While they're at his place, it's this adorable little, it looks like a hobbit hole, you know, in this little hobbit hole of a fawn house. He's giving her tea. He's got a fire on. She's talking about all the joys of winter and how there's sled rides, there's skiing, there's throwing snowballs, there's Christmas. And he explains, oh, we haven't had a Christmas in over 100 years. It's been winter for over 100 years. You would have loved Narnia in summer. And then he offers to play some of the music for her that they would have usually used for celebrations during summer. I think it's on a pan flute. And as she's drinking her tea, she's looking at the fire, and all of a sudden it comes to life where we've got little fawns dancing around in the fire, and then she suddenly falls straight into a slumber as if she's being hypnotized. All the candles go out, and when Lucy finally comes to, everything is dark and Mr. Tumnus is hiding. She says that she should go now, but Mr. Tumnus feels awful. He says that he's done something horrible. And she's like, whatever you've done can't have been that bad. And he's like, it's not what I've done, it's what I'm doing. I'm kidnapping you. Which seems like a very terrible thing to say.
I know.
Right.
I'm actually surprised he admitted it. Like, I don't think many
Mhm.
kidnappers go around saying, oh, I'm kidnapping you.
Right.
He explains that it's all because of the White Witch. She makes everything here winter and has given orders that if anybody ever finds a human, they're to turn them over. So she tells him, I thought we were friends. And at that point in time, something clicks in his brain. He's like, I can't do this. I have to take her back. He goes and he runs and brings her back to the lamppost and asks her whether or not she can find her way back from there. And she says yes. And he says, be careful. There are the White Witch's spies everywhere, including the trees. And so then he sends her on her way. She then comes tumbling out of the wardrobe, and she thinks that she's been gone for hours because, of course, she was hypnotized, put to sleep. Have no idea how long that lasted for. And she thinks that everybody must have missed her during this time. We can hear that Peter is just now barely getting to 100, so she hasn't been gone for that long. Although counting to 100 does take a long time. Far too long.
Right.
So they're all confused. She's super confused. And she takes them over to the wardrobe. And they're testing it out. They're knocking on the back of it. They're opening up the door. They're looking around. They're like, it's just a wardrobe. So they absolutely do not believe her. And then Edmund, being an 11-year-old who likes to be an asshole, says that he believes her and then continues to make fun of her for it. Of course, Peter berates him in return. This is their little married couple bickering that they do constantly.
Right.
Later that night, Lucy gets up in the middle of the night and she heads back to the wardrobe. Edmund was already up and sees her and begins to slowly follow her. And she successfully goes into the wardrobe and then tries to scare her by basically opening up the wardrobe door and saying boo. But then he's getting inside the wardrobe and comes to find out Narnia is real. So he stumbles into the snow. He finds the lamppost. And as he's continuing to stumble around, trying to find Lucy, he almost gets run over by a reindeer-led carriage. This is the carriage of the White Witch. So the carriage stops, and a dwarf, Ginnerbrecht, I'm going to say that.
Oh, that's good.
Jumps out. Oh, good. I'm so glad. So he jumps out and heads straight to Edmund with a knife in hand, and it's very threatening. He's got his knife to his neck, and he says, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm just here for my sister. I'm just here for my sister. And the White Witch comes up and says, oh, are you a son of Adam? He says, what? So she lures him into her sleigh and she wraps him up and is being all nice to him. She tells him, can I get you some hot chocolate? And so she makes a little hot chocolate out of this magic potion by dumping it into the snow. It's this very beautiful goblet of hot chocolate. And she tells him, I can give you anything you want. And Edmund says, can you make me taller? And she's, I can get you.
Right.
So he says, what about Turkish delights? Okay, I have to ask.
What
have
are
any of
Turkish
y'all...
delights?
Oh, they're delicious. Have you had Turkish delights, Jim?
No.
Oh my gosh, they're so tasty. So a
What are
Turkish
they?
delight, it's like a jelly candy that's usually filled with some kind of nuts and or dried fruit, and then it's also covered in powdered sugar. So they're very tasty.
They didn't look very appetizing when he was eating them. It was like,
They're
of all the
very
things to ask
tasty.
for.
It's like poor people's candy, right? It's like what
Like
your mom
gummy
can make for you based on the supplies in the house.
What they have, what's available.
Right, exactly. All you
Right.
have to do is just roll it in some powdered sugar and you're good.
Yeah.
Right. Look at this. What a delight.
Yeah, there you go.
I will tell you though, they are delicious.
Okay.
I should caveat that with, I'm one of those few people who loves dried fruit and nuts and trail mix is my jam. So if you don't like dried fruit or nuts, it's probably not going to be your jam.
Right.
Okay, here we go. While the White Witch is talking all nicely to him, she asks him, you came here to find your sister. How many of you are there? And he says, oh, I've got 2 sisters and a brother, so there's 4 of us. And so she tells him that she would really like it if he were to bring his family back here. And that if he does, she'll make him king. And then he says, wait, but wouldn't that make Peter king? And she says, nope, just you. And so he says, okay, I'll go and I'll see if I can get them back here. And she says, all right, but if I ever see you again, you better bring your family with you. They say their goodbyes, and she says that she'll be seeing him soon and takes off. Right at that moment, Lucy pops up and finds Edmund, and she says, what are you doing here? This is where she says, oh, you have to meet Mr. Tumnus, and explains that all of this is the White Witch's doing. She thinks that she's queen, but she's really not, and she's really a bad person. So he's very confused as they go out of the wardrobe, and from there, of course, it's the middle of the night still, so Lucy goes to wake up Peter and Susan, and they just still don't believe her. Lucy says that Edmund was there too. It's real. And Edmund says he's just playing along. Children don't know how to stop pretending. This causes Lucy to cry, and she runs off, and they give chase. Lucy then runs straight into the professor, and McCready throws a fit over it. Then the professor takes Susan and Peter into his study, saying that they really seem to have upset his housekeeper. So Susan then tells him that Lucy thinks that she's found a magical land in the wardrobe. And he is so extremely interested in this idea. And he says that he believes Lucy. There's a very iconic line in here where he says, if she's not mad and she's not lying, then logically we must assume that she is telling the truth. Now, according to some of my research, and Celeste knows this, I am not a religious scholar. I don't pretend to be. C.S. Lewis was a vocal advocate for Christianity, which we see a lot throughout this movie and throughout the book. There's a lot of homage to Christianity. And in his book, Mere Christianity, he presented 3 similar choices about Jesus' claim to be the Son of God. He's either a liar, a lunatic, or Lord. This is known as the trilemma argument and is often used by Christians. Any questions about it? Because I can't answer anything more than that.
Right. Yeah, there is a very religious tone to the movie.
Mm-hmm. And even as we progress further, when we meet Aslan, there's lots of religious iconography and homage there. The next day, they're playing cricket, and Edmund hits the ball and ends up breaking one of the windows. They go inside to investigate it, when all of a sudden Mrs. McCready is coming through to find them, to seemingly punish them. And to avoid this punishment, they all run for the wardrobe. All 4 of the children make it into the wardrobe, and as they're stumbling over one another, they fall into Narnia. Peter takes this time to confront Edmund, calling him a liar, and Edmund says, you didn't believe her either. And this is when Lucy says, let me take you all to Mr. Tumnus. She takes them to Mr. Tumnus's hobbit hole, and unfortunately, the door is smashed in. And when we enter inside Mr. Tumnus's house, we can see the leftover chaos from his abduction. Peter grabs a notice off the wall that reads that Mr. Tumnus has been captured for treason. And Susan says, we should really go back. We don't need to be involved in all of this. Lucy says that they need to find Tumnus because she's the human that he was helping. All of a sudden, outside, they hear a psst, and they think it's a bird, so they're very confused. And so they head towards that, and they get a little scared because they hear some rustling, and all of a sudden Mr. Beaver pops out. He's an actual beaver. Peter is calling to the beaver as if he were a cat, and he has his hand out, and the beaver responds by saying, I ain't gonna smell it. Beaver gives Lucy the hanky that she had given Mr. Tumnus when they first met. This is his way of signaling that they can trust him because he knows Mr. Tumnus. Beaver wants them to follow, and after much hesitation, they do.
I would have loved to train a beaver.
I wonder what that would be like.
Is that a thing? Like people train, like for film? Like train beavers?
Yeah. I mean, it's possible.
I guess anything's possible.
The real question, is there an animal that is not trainable?
All animals are trainable.
I wonder why they decided to go with a real pack of wolves as opposed to just like CGIing them like they did the rest of the animals. Like, horses. Did they mention that or?
All right, if I had to give you a theory, back then, CGI wasn't as good as it is now. And there was a lot of running, chasing type scenes that I don't think they could have CGI'd back then to look as good as real live wolves doing it, because the wolf running was such a big part of the movie. It's my theory. Everything else they could have went without, but the running was, and the jumping, like all that stuff's pretty important.
Right.
Hey, we'll take your theory because we don't have one. So we're just
and they just wanted to work with me,
Oh, yeah.
Beaver takes the pack of children back to his home and says that he wants them to meet his wife, who doesn't really have a name. I think she's just Mrs. Beaver. So they interact like an old couple who's been married for a very long time. They give each other grief. But Edmund looks longingly towards the mountains where the White Witch has said that her castle is. But they pull him inside with the rest of them. Mrs. Beaver serves them all fish and chips, which looks like sardines and like wood chipping.
Literal fish and chips.
So Beaver tells them that there's hope. Aslan's on the move, and because they're there, that means that the prophecy is coming to life. Edmund asks who Aslan is, and Beaver laughs until he realizes that they really have no idea who Aslan is. And Beaver says that they've all been waiting for them. There's the prophecy, that includes the kids, where Adam's flesh and bone meet, and the evil time will be done. That's my summation of it. That's not word for word, just so everybody knows. But 2 sons of Adam and 2 daughters of Eve will defeat the White Witch, and currently Aslan is putting together an army. Susan, still, the very bright child here, is still adamant about leaving. She's like, we really don't need to get involved in all of this. We can leave now. But they're adamant. They have to stay. They have to find Mr. Tumnus. So when they turn around, though, they find out that Edmund has left. So we cut to Edmund walking in the snow without his coat. I don't know why he didn't take his coat. Like, that just seems like the thing to do, is bring your coat so you don't freeze.
Maybe because it made him stand out so much. Like, that was a very flashy coat he was wearing. Maybe.
He's going to get robbed.
Yeah.
Oh, so this reminds me, the worst part about this whole movie was the fucking fake snow. Like,
What is that made of?
All right, so they've done many different ways. For this particular movie, it was finely grained paper.
Oh.
Yeah. That just stuck to everything. Like in slash.
There's so much.
I hated it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, no, it was tons and tons and tons of this finely grained paper with a little bit of liquid added. Like, it was just so gross.
Oh, so
That
it's like
sounds awful.
forever spitballs.
Right. That's what it was, a big giant spitball. That's a great way to describe it.
Oh my God. Poor puppies. So it was
is-
probably
it
getting
sucked.
stuck to their paws all the time.
Mhm.
Were they eating any of it? Is that?
Not really, but yes, to your paws. We had to wear these special suits because, like, it would mess up your clothes. Masks, like, it was COVID before COVID. Yeah, it was. I hated it. It was. I was like, why? Why would you do this for snow? We just never.
Just why? That seems like a waste of paper, though, too. I
Like-
don't know.
It's half the Brazilian forest over there.
Yeah.
Right. So there it is. I guess the philosophy was, like, normally you just shoot a movie like that in snow. Like, you go somewhere where it's snowing and that's where you shoot it. But everything that they shot pretty much in a soundstage, they just wanted to be able to have snow 24/7. Yeah, no, all of that stuff's in the soundstage.
That's so cool.
Anyways,
What paper? Who would have thought? I would have never guessed that.
yeah. The sharks suck. I'll send you a picture of me later in my snowsuit.
Oh,
Yes,
please.
That'll be so phenomenal.
Yes.
The others chase after Edmund, but they come across the White Witch's castle of ice and see him entering into the castle itself. The others want to try and stop him, but Beaver intervenes and says that the White Witch wants all 4 of them because she wants to kill them to keep the prophecy from coming true. So while Susan and Peter bicker, and Beaver says that Aslan's the only one who can help them. So Peter instructs Beaver to take them to Aslan. Now we're inside the White Witch's castle, and Edmund is looking around in her foyer, essentially, which is covered in stone statues of Narnian creatures. We've got lions, we've got centaurs, we've got bears, warriors, griffins, etc. So we've got real animals and we got mythical animals. Then a wolf pounces on Edmund. He threatens him, and Edmund announces that he's the son of Adam and he's here to see the White Witch. And that's when the wolf lets him up and leads him to the White Witch himself. In her
Okay,
throne.
that's when I worked with the kids and the wolf and the White Witch. That's when we all worked together that day.
So did the wolves actually pounce on someone? Was it like a body double? Or what did that play?
I think we had him pounce on like a green mannequin.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
What is there a specific command for pound?
It wasn't something that we prepped him to do. You know what I mean? Yeah, we just knew. Go over there, let all that, get some chicken. You know what I'm saying?
That's what everybody wants, right? They just want to go over there,
Right.
do something, and then go get some chicken.
You can probably control 80% of the world just with chicken. So
Just with food in general, yeah.
Very much so. I'm very pliable to having a treat. I'm like,
Yes.
take me to the cupcake. Let's
that's right.
So inside of her throne room, Edmund waits so that way the wolf can go and retrieve the White Witch. And as he's waiting, he goes and he sits in her throne. And when she appears, he gets startled and gets up very quickly. He's like, I wasn't touching anything, I swear.
Right.
The White Witch inquires, what about your sisters and your brother? And he says, but they don't listen to me. And she screams at him for not bringing them with him. He asks if he can have some more Turkish delights now. And she says, oh, you want some sweeties? And so her henchman takes him to the jail. And he's like, you want your num-nums? And he pushes him into a jail cell, essentially. Obviously not getting any num-nums. Mogrim, who's the main wolf, is tasked with attacking the beavers' home because Edmund did let them know that the beavers were helping them. And we cut back to the beavers' home, and where the kids and the beavers are scurrying to skedaddle the hell out of there, when all of a sudden the wolves pounce on the beavers' home and begin to dig into the sticks.
Yeah, that was a fun. That was years inside the house with chicken.
Everything revolves on a chicken. Wait, so you said you were in the actual house with the chicken to get the dogs?
Yeah, so like when they're shooting outside, you just see the wolves trying to get inside that area, and the trainers are inside. Like we're calling them, they're trained to come to these special noises that we do, and we're trained to dig it up and be aggressive, and then they get a treat.
Oh my goodness!
Like a day command.
So cool. So was the beaver home tall enough that you could actually stand in it, or did you have to sit?
Or was it like a miniature version?
You know what? There was a few beaver homes, right? There was one that they would shoot from the outside that was the size that you would think it is. And then when they're shooting inside, it's a lot bigger. It's almost like a miniature sound stage.
That's why you never see the two together in the same place.
Right.
Our band of misfits head to underground tunnels to escape, and upon exiting the tunnel, Lucy trips over some of the statues of forest animals who have been turned to stone, and we see all sorts of woodland creatures frozen in time. Here, a fox pops out and interrupts them, and Beaver's not having it. He's like, "You can't fool me. I know you're part of the wolves." And the fox says, "I may look like one of the bad guys, but it's just a bad family resemblance." He has an idea, and he convinces everybody to climb up into the tree while the fox sweeps away their footprints. But of course, the wolf pack is hot on their trail, and the wolf pack attacks. One of them picks him up in his mouth, and they begin to interrogate the fox, asking where children went. And the fox says that they went north. And at that point in time, the wolves toss him out of their mouth and pretty much leave him to die if he didn't have any help. So did they use like a doll or something instead, or some kind of green screen type of a thing for the fox?
Yeah, I think for the fox, that may have been pretty much completely CGI.
Okay.
That part. Yeah.
So our heroes of the film put on a fire and they begin to fix up Mr. Fox here. And he says that he has to be going, though, because Aslan has asked him to round up the troops. They're getting ready for battle. We cut back to Edmund back into the dungeon. He takes a bite of some very bad bread, it looks like, and a drink. And they are not his num-nums. They are not the Turkish delights he was looking for. And here he meets Mr. Tumnus, who is in the cell right next to him. And Mr. Tumnus asks, "If you're not going to eat that, can I have that?" Because he's probably been there for days at this point in time. Edmund recognizes him as Mr. Tumnus, and then Mr. Tumnus recognizes him as Edmund because he's got a similar facial resemblance to Lucy. The White Witch then comes into the dungeon and says nobody was at the beaver dam, and she threatens to kill Edmund. This is when Edmund realistically freaks out, and she tells her henchman, that's the word I was looking for, to release the fawn, and says that she turns to Mr. Tumnus and says that he is here and he's in all this trouble because Edmund turned him in. So the White Witch takes off with Edmund in tow so that way he can direct her to where his brother and sisters are. And now we cut back to the children. They're in the forest. They're trying to traipse through all the snow. And all of a sudden they hear a sleigh behind them. So they take off into every other direction and take cover. And while they're hiding, Beaver says, "Okay, let me go and investigate this." And Beaver returns and says, "I hope you all have been good this year." All the children pop out from behind a rock and they see that it's Santa. And Santa then says, "You guys being here has helped to restore some hope in Narnia, and we can already see that the hope has weakened the witch's powers. The snow is starting to thaw, and at some point in time, he will finally be able to have Christmas again." He gives them all some presents for being good children that will help them in battle. He gives Lucy a healing potion and a dagger, saying that he hopes that she never has to use it, but he believes that she can. She will be brave enough to use it if she has to. He gives Susan a bow and arrows and a horn, and he gives Peter a sword and a shield. And the inscription on the blade of Peter's sword reads, "When Aslan shakes his mane, Narnia shall know spring again." I ask you, if that's all it took, why hasn't he done that for hundreds of years?
Right.
Like, Aslan had the power all along.
Some people are discontent.
It reminds me of The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy could go home all she wanted at any time. She had the magic inside of her the whole time.
Yeah. These type of stories, I feel, are going to be a lost art form because I just don't think that people's minds are even geared towards the imagination. We're just so matter of fact nowadays. You know what I'm saying? If we were to try to write a story like that, it would just not make sense the whole time we're writing it.
Unless it's in space. People love their science fiction.
Right. Yes, exactly. As do I.
It's a great genre.
Yes.
So with that, Santa is off and it is announcing that winter is almost over. Long live Aslan and Merry Christmas. I have to also ask, is this now officially a Christmas movie? We've mentioned Christmas like 3 or 4 times.
Right.
When did it come out? Maybe it was like around Christmas.
I think it actually came out on Christmas.
Oh, did it? There you
I
go.
think so.
It did. For
So
sure.
it's official. We've deemed this a Christmas movie
There
that
you
we're
go.
doing in November. To be fair, Christmas does start, I think, the middle of October nowadays. So
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
So Peter, then it starts to dawn on him that if there means that there is no more winter, that means there is no more ice. So they head to the waterfalls that they were hoping to cross because they were supposed to be completely iced over, and realize they need to cross as soon as humanly possible because the ice is starting to melt. They also hear the wolves hot on their trail. So they are running through the forest and the woods, and just as they get to the waterfall's base, that's when they start to hear the ice cracking. Beaver says that he'll go first, and he's starting to test the ice. He's walking across the ice and patting it with his little beaver tail, and it seems fine. So the rest of them start to follow suit, and as they do, the ice continues to crack, but the wolves are also fast on their trail, and they start to surround them. On top of the waterfall, at each side of the base of the waterfall, they're surrounded. While they're arguing, the waterfall is starting to break through, and Peter has his sword in hand. He's trying to threaten the wolf with it, but he's not terribly scary with it because he can't even hold it straight. But he then decides to have the smart idea of taking his sword and stabbing it straight into the ice to have something to hold on to while the waterfall bursts through the ice and sends them all down the river. The beavers luckily can swim, so they just jump into the water, and they help to guide the ice block to the river bank when they have decided that it's safe and they're far enough away from the wolves.
So, Tim, how was this film scenes and like where was it? I'm assuming not in the studio, or was it somehow?
That was also inside the studio. Big green screen type set. Yeah. Big green screen set, water. A totally controlled environment for surely not the river.
Could have accidentally actually lost Lucy.
No, you're at a loss. Like when you're doing this stuff, you're at a loss because like the only true people that can picture and visualize it is the director and the, what they call it, special effects coordinator, all that kind of stuff. Like we have no idea what it's going to turn out to be. They just say, hey, have it stand there and have it look exactly right there and have it do so.
Just got to trust in the
It's
process.
interesting. Now it's like that was one of my first movies having to do that kind of stuff. But now I own it. But back then it was just, what are we doing?
So, understandably, all the children are soaked to the core, and they're still wearing their fur coats, so they're completely soaked with fur coats on. That must not have been fun. I think that would have been the equivalent of your spitball snow, probably, but worse. I don't know. I just have the sense of being wet in like fur. That doesn't seem like a fun thing to do.
Right.
Once they reach the riverbank, we see that some flowers are starting to bloom out of the snow, and as it continues to warm up, they ditch the coats, thankfully, so they don't have to carry them for too long. The White Witch approaches the waterfall and sees that all of the ice is melted, and she's properly pissed. And the wolves go back, they retrieve the fox, and they bring him to her. And she is threatening this fox. Edmund tries to jump in front of the fox to protect him, and tells her that Aslan is supposed to be at the stone with an army. She says, "Thank you, Edmund." And then she turns. She's got a little scepter. She basically touches the fox with it with the tip and statuifies him. Further into the highland, the kids come to an encampment filled with Aslan's army. We have centaurs, lions, gorillas, cheetahs, dogs, horses, bears, etc., etc. Peter comes to the head centaur, who is Aslan's general, and says that we've come to see Aslan. They've come upon a tent, and the whole army bows as Aslan steps out from his tent and welcomes the children. He inquires where Edmund is, and they said that they need his help because Edmund has been captured. Peter then says that Edmund betrayed them because he was too hard on them, and Susan says, "No, it wasn't just you. It was all of us." So Peter has now changed, and he's out on top of a mountain ledge or something of that nature, and he's staring along the landscape when Aslan comes up to him and says, that over there on the far end is Paravel, where the four thrones, this is where they will rule from in the future. So Peter has his severe doubts and says that no matter what, he's going to help, and that they want their families to be safe. We cut to the White Witch's camp in the forest, and Edmund is tied up to a tree. This is where the White Witch's henchman tries to torture him a little bit, but he can't really do too much to him. Anyway, so we turn back to Susan and Lucy, and they have also changed. They're talking about their dresses and how they should bring one of the dresses or maybe a whole trunk full to their mom. And just as they start playing in the water, Susan goes to grab a towel to dry off, and one of the wolves pops out at her. So I'm assuming the wolves were in this scene as well.
Yes.
So was someone in the tree with chicken? That's to get them jumping up.
That's right. It's all about the chicken. Yes.
Yep.
It's always chicken.
Fun.
So Susan lunges for her horn, blows the horn, and the girls climb up into the tree, as Celeste mentioned, and Peter goes running off towards them. He's got his sword in hand, and Aslan follows, but once they reach it, Aslan tells everybody else that this is Peter's battle. So the wolf then jumps on Peter, and Peter ends up stabbing him. What is that for the wolves? I'm assuming you don't actually stab them.
Right. Now, I know they have a knife that would collapse and not go inside, but I'm not sure exactly. I don't remember exactly. I know we trained to do it. I don't know if we tried it and it didn't really look good and they just did it all CGI, or if it was just a combination of both. I have to watch the movie again. See.
So the
It's been
second
20
wolf
years
that was
sometimes.
It's been a hot minute. I just realized that. Yeah, it's been 20 years since this movie came out.
Yeah.
CGI has come a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the second wolf that was with the wolf gets away, and the shoulders chase after him. At this point, for Peter's bravery, Aslan knights him. Back at the White Witch's camp, they're planning their strategy when the wolf has led Aslan's soldiers to the encampment. They effectively rescue Edmund, and the White Witch is pissed. At Aslan's camp, Edmund has returned and is talking to Aslan by himself before heading back to his siblings. Aslan comes up and tells them that there's no need to bring up the past as the past. So Lucy hugs Edmund, and they all are very glad that he's back, even though Peter is a bit reluctant and tells him not to wander off anymore. The kids go off and start practicing using their weapons and preparing for battle, and all of a sudden, Mr. Beaver interrupts them to let them know that the White Witch is approaching to meet Aslan. We cut over to the White Witch and her entourage coming into Aslan's encampment, leading up to Aslan's tent, and the White Witch lets Aslan know that Edmund is a traitor, and that the law states that, as a traitor, he belongs to her. And unless she has blood, Narnia will suffer fire and water, and she states confidently that Edmund will die on the stone table. Aslan responds by inviting the White Witch to speak with him alone in the tent, and after some agonizing moments, she emerges silent, because they have struck a deal. Edmund is utterly terrified. Aslan turns and says that she has renounced her claim on his blood, and she leaves. She asks him, "How will I know if you'll keep your promise?" He just roars at her, and so she sits down and says, "Fine." Later on that night, Lucy is struggling to sleep, and she hears walking happening outside of their tent. So Lucy goes to wake up Susan, and they head towards that sound. These are very brave girls. Celeste and I are that when we go camping and we hear a sound, we're like, "No, thank you.
We're going
I'm
in the
okay."
opposite direction. Yeah.
Right.
So these girls find Aslan walking into the woods, and they join him on his journey to the stone table. So I was watching this a while back with my friend Rachel. Shout out to Rachel. And she grew up very religious. She was a pastor's daughter. And she said that this is also an example of Christian metaphor, where apparently before Jesus was put onto the cross, I think, now I could be quoting this very wrong. I did not take notes on this part. But when he was on his way to get crucified, essentially, he had two people with him walking before he met his untimely death.
Interesting.
Aslan, right before he reaches the stone table, Aslan sends the girls off, and as he walks up to the stone table, he's greeted by a mob of the White Witch's soldiers, all before the White Witch appears in this gorgeous black dress, holding a very large dagger. I tell you what, Tilda Swinton is giving in this movie. She has so many great outfits. I love them all.
Yeah.
Right.
Amazing.
So at this point in time, she tells her minions that Aslan is to be bound, shaved, and then thrust upon the stone table. She announces that tomorrow they will take over Narnia, and she raises her great dagger into the air and wails it down on him, stabbing him, and then announcing, "The great cat is dead!" She says that she has had her blood for tonight and tells her general to prepare their army for battle tomorrow. After everybody has left, Susan and Lucy go to sit with Aslan's body, sobbing. And all of a sudden, some mice come through, and they eat through Aslan's ropes, releasing Aslan's body from his bindings. Susan then exclaims, after a couple of minutes of them sitting with Aslan, that they need to leave and warn the others. But Lucy remembers and has this brilliant idea that they can pass the message along using the trees. Because the trees talk to one another, they talk to everything in the forest. They pass the message along. The message gets to Peter and Edmund, and after hearing word of Aslan's death, Peter is then put in charge of the army. So now we've cut to the battlefield. We see Aslan's troops lined up on one side prepared to fight, and the White Witch's army slowly gains over the hill. We have eagles and griffins start the battling by first dropping boulders onto the White Witch's army, and then Peter signals for the two sides to begin charging at one another into battle. We cut to Susan and Lucy with Aslan's body, and they're like, okay, it's morning time now, we should probably leave. And right as they're about to leave, they turn their backs, and they hear a clatter, and they feel the ground shake. They look back, and the stone table has cracked in half, and Aslan's body is nowhere to be found. In just a moment, after they're done with their shock and disbelief, Aslan appears fully alive in the stone threshold, his mane fully back intact. It has grown back to
Just
its
like
normal
Jesus
luster.
on, what is it, Easter? When he rises?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know anything.
Like I said, religious scholar over here. But this is supposed to be that reflection, yes, of Jesus coming back to life. Aslan explains that when a non-traitor sacrifices themselves in place of a traitor, even death will reverse. Susan and Lucy climb on board of Aslan's back so that way they can all head to the battlefield. We head back to the battlefield where Peter instructs the troops to fall back and lead the White Witch's army into the rocks. This is where reinforcements are waiting, and we see a bunch of animals shooting arrows and throwing rocks. But all of a sudden, we see that one of the White Witch's army soldiers is also up there, and Peter is pitched off his unicorn when it's shot with an arrow. All throughout, the White Witch has been charging alongside her soldiers this whole time, and Aslan's general sees her and heads straight towards her. He begins to engage with her with his sword, but she is too much of a great swordswoman, and she ends up taking her scepter and stoning him with. Before reaching the battlefield, though, we turn back to Susan, Lucy, and Aslan, and they make a pit stop at the witch's castle to revive the stone creatures in her foyer, including Mr. Tumnus. Returning back to the battlefield, we have a lot of back and forth. We've got Susan and Lucy and Aslan, and then we've got the battlefield, so we go back and forth a lot. Back on the battlefield for, I think, the last time now. The White Witch has her eyes set on Peter. She's like, "You shall die." Peter tells Edmund to head back, grab their sisters, and head home. But of course, Edmund does what Edmund does best, and he doesn't listen. And he heads straight back into battle. He then, with his sword, destroys the White Witch's stone magic scepter, and she retaliates by impaling him in the gut. Peter sees this and falls straight into his emotions and charges her. And as I mentioned just a bit ago, she's a damn good swordswoman. So she's just flipping and flopping all these 2 swords at him, and he's got absolutely nothing on her. They only stop when Aslan comes in with reinforcements and roars, and everybody starts to charge the White Witch's army. Bloodshed commences. Right when the White Witch is about to stab Peter dead, Aslan leaps on her, has her pinned to the ground, and eats her face off.
I feel like he took her out pretty easily. I don't know why it took this long. I know.
Right.
Aslan turns and says, "It's finished." So the girls arrive as Peter is getting up and inquires where Edmund is. They see that Edmund is gasping for breath on the ground, and Lucy then uses her magic healing potion to heal Edmund. Briefly dies for a minute. It's like he died on the operating table, but then he comes back to life. Now it's time to celebrate. At the Castle of the Four Thrones, the children are giving their titles as King and Queens of Narnia, and Aslan tells them, once a King or Queen of Narnia, always a Queen of Narnia. He bestows upon them different titles as well: Queen Lucy the Valiant, Queen Susan the Gentle, King Edmund the Just, King Peter the Magnificent. I think Peter got the best out of all of those. If I had to have a moniker, I would be the Magnificent. Right. Although he also sounds like a magician. They party, and Aslan takes off. He's on to bigger and brighter things. Mr. Tumnus tells Lucy that that's just something he does. He'll be back eventually. So we cut to about 15 or 20 years later, and the 4 of them are out on a hunt, chasing a silver stag. And they come up upon the lamppost, and they say that they have the faintest memory of what this used to be. They head into the woods, and they find themselves back to being their children selves, falling out of the wardrobe in this bare room, where the professor opens the door and says, "Oh, there you guys went." And he asks, "What are you guys all doing in the wardrobe?" Peter looks at his siblings and says, "You wouldn't believe us." And Professor says, "Try me." And that's the end. I promise.
Yeah.
Yep. I wonder if that was the point of counting to 100 on hide and go seek, just to establish that time there flies a lot faster than time home.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to figure out, like, they were gone for 20 or 15 years. I don't know exactly. But they were gone for years. Like, they grew up. How long is that in real people time?
Right.
Oh, max.
Could it be like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
Right.
So, this movie does in fact pass the Bechdel test, but not as frequently as I thought it would. Because we have so many female characters, but a lot of them just are not.
Oh, yeah.
Some fun trivia about the movie. So, Georgie Henley's reaction to Mr. Tumnus at the light post is completely genuine. She had not seen James McAvoy in his costume before this scene was filmed, so when she screamed, that reaction was real. And then also her reaction to the snowy world was real as well. They carried her onto the set, blindfolded, so that way she could make her first entrance, not knowing what was happening. Something else that Georgie did was, when the adults were swearing on set, she apparently set up a swear bucket. James McAvoy was apparently the worst offender of this. I want to know how much money she got for that.
Right.
Right.
So, back to Aslan, there were no real lines used in this film because Andrew Adamson wanted a moment where Georgie could reach out and touch Aslan. So apparently it took 10 hours to render each frame of the CGI Aslan, and he had 5.2 million individual hairs.
Wow.
Yes. They did do before filming, it did meet with a lot of real lions and did like filming days with them on a blue screen or a green screen and, get movement and stuff like that so they can use for the CGI.
Research. right?
It's it's something that people in our industry, like, we're very cautious of that now because, like, obviously we want to work and get paid, where people will come and try to film your animal once and then use it for many other things. So you have to be careful.
Right.
Like, there's people probably using that lion footage for stuff to this day.
And there's no contracts that, like, or maybe back then they didn't have.
I mean, we have
that.
contracts, but it's like well, now we are trying to make those contracts. That's a lot of what the actors are on strike right now because those, with the new AI, you can do Star Wars 1 with an actor, and then if they just died or quit or whatever, you have enough images and enough curio, you can do a sequel without the actor even being there.
Right. And especially when you think about like how many takes it takes in order to put together a movie and how much is left on the cutting room floor.
Right. Yeah, no, like now they can just, so people are trying to protect themselves.
Understandable.
Right.
Another fun fact that I have is plot summaries between J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings novels and C.S. Lewis's Narnia stories were no coincidence. Both men were members of a literary discussion group known as the Inklings. Living trees that move and fight, but also provide a safe zone, languages created for the legendary cultures with the mythology, rescues from towers by flying creatures are all just a few examples that these two stories shared. And including New Zealand. I'm in love with that.
Yes.
So we're at the point of our episode where we will rate the movie on our caffeine scale. On a scale of 1 to 5 espresso shots, how stimulated did this movie keep us? 1, we're falling asleep, and 5, we're completely buzzing. Tim, if you don't mind, how would you rate this from 1 to 5 espresso shots?
I would say 2.5.
2.5. Very generous.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay.
Do you have any rational?
It was just extremely slow and extremely boring. Like,
oh my God.
Yeah.
and you know what's funny is reading it is a lot more interesting, actually. But just trying to watch it in a movie, it just goes by. Just a little slow.
Because you did read the novels?
Yeah. No.
Oh, okay. Sorry, you're talking about this, like the script? When you said reading it.
Right. The script or even Kenzie reading it, you know what I mean? It's like, it's sort of interesting that way, but, you know.
Yeah. That's funny. Okay.
Yeah, they had a lot of panning shots for a lot of the movie too, which was gorgeous, don't get me wrong. But I'm just like, okay, this movie is 2 hours and 20 minutes. This is like an hour longer than it needs to be.
It was a long movie.
Yeah. It was.
I'm going to agree with you on my scale. I was so nervous because I remember when I first watched the movie, I didn't read the novels. And so watching the movie is like the first introduction to this, like these books and these movies. And I was like, I don't like it. But also I was really young. So this is the first time I rewatched it in 20 years. So I'm like, oh, maybe my feelings might have changed towards it. They didn't. And I was so nervous because I was like, oh my God, I don't want to like say I don't really care for the movie. And then we have someone who worked on it. And I don't want to like, but I'm so glad to hear you feel the same way.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just the kids or the fact that it was long. I don't know, but it wasn't for me. Kenzie, how about you?
Yeah, I was going to say, but maybe like 3. Like, I could go either way on this movie. It's not something that I'm going to eagerly watch. Like, I'm pretty sure I never saw any of the sequels. I was like, cool. I'm good with this one. I don't know, but I'm glad that we all agreed.
Yeah.
Just know it's a little long.
Yeah.
No, for sure. Sit your kids in front of it and just like let it babysit them. Like, it's cool for that or whatever.
Thank you so much, Tim, for
Yes.
joining us today. We really appreciate your insight and providing and sharing just your journey with the movie also. Like, that's such a special thing for us to get to hear.
Yes.
Something
We never get to
never-
hear about like, the behind the scenes or anything like that. So it was really cool to have that perspective.
Oh, cool. Right on. Thanks for having me, and you're welcome, and anytime.
Is there anything that you'd like to promote or plug?
See, not really. If you're doing a movie, need animals, hit me up. I'm on Instagram. Acting Canine Services. Instagram. If you need your dog trained, I do that.
Oh, cool.
I might have to hit you up on that. 'Cause mine seem to be getting worse with age.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a movie.
Both.
I see Mackenzie, you have a boxer, right?
No, I was dog sitting 2 boxers
Okay.
while I was in Oregon.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
they're-
nice.
I'm like their aunt, is what I'm going to call it.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah,
Wow.
Kenzie has kitties.
I do. I have 2 cats, and they're very
Oh,
well
awesome.
loved, actually.
Nice. Love it. But no, that's it. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. We really appreciated having you.
Yep. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Caffeinated Flicks. We're a self-published podcast produced and edited by Kenzie.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what films you'd like us to cover, what we can do better, or just say hi.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can follow us on Instagram at caffeinatedflickspod or email us at caffeinatedflicks@gmail.com. We'll catch you on the flick side.